I'm a film programmer at the Hollywood Theater there. Before I was doing that, I was kind of doing what Neil and Katie are doing, kind of renting out theaters and showing a lot of my favorite movies, exploitation films and older horror movies. But the movies I really love the most are old school kung fu films. And when I first started programming, I was really shocked at how few 35mm prints were available of these films. They were incredibly hard to come by. Even in the world of film collecting, where you can find extremely obscure movies, there were very few kung fu films. And what really bothered me even more than that was the fact that nobody seemed to care. It's like just the scorned genre of film, which really bothers me, because I love these movies so much. So I started collecting films and just doing a lot of research on trying to figure out where to dig up these prints. And if you are a Kung Fu fan, it doesn't take long before you start seeing this logo, and you know it very well. This is the Shaw Scope logo. Shaw Brothers was the biggest studio in the history of Hong Kong cinema, started by Run Shaw and his brother Runmi Shaw. They made all kinds of movies. They made like somewhere around 1,000 films during their time. During the 70s and 80s, during the Kung Fu heyday, they cranked out Kung Fu films. Shaw Brothers became like a Kung Fu factory. And everybody who worked at Shaw Brothers lived at the studio as well. And you basically just worked constantly. Shaw Brothers, or Run Shaw just literally ran like a factory. But these films are always really hard to find on 35mm. A few years ago, I bought some trailers. I also collect previews as well, and I bought some Shaw Brothers trailers from a guy in Canada, and I got them, and they were in really good condition, which is really rare. Usually you can find this stuff, they're all like beat up and faded and all this. So I started asking questions, trying to find out where he got them, and he was being really shady about it. It became obvious that he probably stolen them from somewhere, and he just stopped answering my emails. So, Neil, you can go to the next slide. Up there, I think he's up there. So luckily, one of the trailers he sent me had this movie ticket inside, Shaw Theater. So I did some research and found out that Run Shaw had owned a small theater chain here in North America, and that he had sent his niece, Lucy Shaw, over to Canada to run the Canadian chain, which is just very few theaters. And so I had a theory that the prints were probably shipped over from Hong Kong, since film's so heavy and expensive to ship overseas that it probably never got shipped back. So I started asking her. She didn't really care. She didn't really know what I was talking about. But luckily she mailed me a key. So next slide. So me and my girlfriend took a trip up to Vancouver, and this was the old Shaw Theater in Vancouver, BC. And if you've ever been to Vancouver, it's known to be a really nice, clean, safe city, except right here on Hastings Street, which actually, after I did this, I saw a show on the Discovery Channel that showed this theater, and they said that this 4-block area here of Hastings Street has the highest concentrated use of heroin and crack in North America, which I totally believe it. I had to park in the back, and it was literally people smoking rock and shooting up the entire time. It was actually really horrible. So next slide is went inside, and this was the old Shaw Theater. It was a huge theater like this. It was actually in really terrible condition, except the auditorium was pretty nice. So next slide. I looked around for a little while. Then there was a big stage like this, and I finally went down to the front, peeled the panel off, and it was jackpot. There was over 1,000 reels of film. Go to the next slide. Was underneath the stage. Go to the next one, which this was an incredible find. And the weird thing about this is it was actually ideal storage condition for film, because it is low humidity in Vancouver, and the fact that the film wasn't in cans or anything. Next slide. And this was incredible. This is like a lot of my very favorite movies that we found. And 35mm prints, the way it works is a movie is 5 to 6 reels long, but these were in total disarray. So we literally had to go through reel by reel and write them down and see what we had. It took a couple days of piecing the list together to figure out what was actually there. Next slide. So then I went back up. That's a little dark, but I went back 2 weeks later with my friend Leno. We started pulling them all out, reel by reel. Go to the next slide. Organizing everything. Go to the next one. We started boxing them up. And next one again. And those are the prints. Next one. Fist of the White Lotus is right there. That's what he's showing you. That's the first one we're going to watch tonight. So that's over 8,000 pounds of kung fu that we boxed up and shipped out of there. Totally amazing. Most of them are the only known 35mm prints, and all of them, as far as I know, are the only prints in the Western Hemisphere of these films. Loading them up on the truck was a huge pain in the ass. The guy didn't want to take them because we had to rent a full-size semi because it's so heavy. He didn't want to take them, and then it took so long to get each pallet on the truck that because all the junkies out there had to have a broom and literally had to sweep the needles out of the way before we could get the next pallet out. And then while we're loading the truck, this one guy comes out, he smokes a rock. He sits down next to us, he rolls up his pant leg, and he takes a knife out of his pocket, and he starts slicing the sores off of his legs. So we're all just kind of keeping an eye on him while we're loading up. Getting the film across the border was another huge obstacle. Next slide. Because the entire shipment was flagged as porn because of this movie. Dirty Ho. Which, if you've seen Dirty Ho, it's actually a lighthearted kung fu comedy about a character named Ho who's a bit underhanded. He's Dirty Ho. But I try to explain that to the guys in customs. So, anyway, but we got him out of there, we saved him, it's totally incredible. So I do a monthly series in Portland, Kung Fu Theater. I show these films, I travel around whenever possible and show them. You can go to the next slide. So this first movie we're watching tonight is Fist of the White Lotus. This stars Gordon Liu, who's the guy over there with the shirt off, and Lo Lei, right there. Lo Lei is my favorite actor from the Shaw Brothers era, and Gordon Liu's really close. Lo Lei started out, he was the star of Five Fingers of Death, if anybody out there has seen that. And after that movie, he started playing villains all the time. And the villain that he became most famous for, and he obviously loved playing the role, was Pai Mei, who is this character. He played it before this movie in Executioners from Shaolin, and then he came back and played it again, and he directed this film in Fist of the White Lotus. And a little bit of setup for this film. If you guys know anything about the Shaolin Temple, the destruction of the Shaolin Temple, which is really famous. If you watch Kung Fu movies, you can see about it all the time. The legend about the destruction of the Shaolin Temple is that the Manchu government saw the Shaolin monks as a possible threat because of their Kung Fu skills. So they recruited Pai Mei, who was a former student of the school, to lead a raid on the temple and burn it to the ground. And there's different variations of the story, but from there, usually the way the story goes is a couple of students trained and then went to exact revenge against Pai Mei by combining their tiger style and crane style. So in the opening scene,